Well, the White House is under increasing pressure to respond to the latest round of cyber attacks targeting U.S. businesses. That includes the largest global ransomware attack on record. Cyber experts say Russian hackers are behind the breaches on software giant Kaseya and a technology firm linked to the Republican National Committee. Less than a month ago, President Biden spoke with Russian President Vladimir Putin about the growing issue, and now he says he has another message for the leader. Nancy Cordes is at the White House. Nancy, what can you tell us?
Well, Anne-Marie, the president told us yesterday that he is going to deliver the message to Putin, but we don't know what the message is and when he plans to deliver it. We do know that when he sat down with Putin last month in Geneva, he made it very clear that the U.S. reserves the right to respond to these cyber attacks if Russia isn't going to respond. But that warning is going to be put to the test next week when White House officials are set to discuss all of this with their Russian counterparts.
It was just 3 weeks ago that Russian President Vladimir Putin told President Biden he would work with him to stem cyber attacks. And yet now the U.S. is dealing with a pair of new attacks that both appear to involve Russian entities.
We're not dealing with, honorable people. They're thieves.
Fred Vicola is the CEO of Kaseya, the Miami-based software firm that was targeted by likely Russian criminals this weekend. They used Kaseya to infiltrate around 800 to 1,500 clients, most of them small businesses. The attack forced a Swedish grocery chain to temporarily shut its doors.
Why do you think the hackers chose you?
I think they believe that small businesses wouldn't put up much of a fight.
The FBI is also investigating another new breach of a contractor for the Republican National Committee. The culprit appears to be a unit of the Russian intelligence service.
FBI is working with the RNC to determine the facts.
When we have something like this happen, we have to respond effectively.
Kirsten Todd runs the Cyber Readiness Institute. She says the latest attacks don't mean the Geneva summit was a bust.
It was important for President Biden to initiate those conversations, to put a red line in the sand.
In the case of Kaseya, the criminals are seeking tens of millions of dollars in unregulated Bitcoin.
Criminals, if they have a means of making money in a very low-risk way, you're going to see more and more very smart people do it.
He says that the U.S. government needs to do more to figure out how to track these cyber currencies that are increasingly favored by criminals like the ones that attacked his company. He would not say whether any of the companies affected have paid the nearly $70 million in Bitcoin that these ransomware attackers were seeking. Anne-Marie?
Yeah, that was one of the questions I was going to ask you. Do we know anything more about the two cyber attacks?
There are a lot of pieces of this puzzle that still have yet to be put into place. In the case of Kaseya, the CEO was telling me, they're still trying to figure out exactly how many companies were even affected. He actually said that at Kaseya, they were able to identify the breach fairly quickly and shut down the part of their system that was affected. So it was only about 50 of their direct clients, he says, that were affected. But all of those clients, many of them are IT companies, that then unwittingly ended up passing it along to their clients. So a lot of the people who were affected and are still dealing with this problem are really small businesses that aren't set up to handle something like this. They don't have the resources, the protection to prevent it from happening, and then dealing with it after the fact is incredibly difficult. So he was telling us these stories of people who he's talking about. These are small businesses, sometimes a family business, where he's talking to the owners on the phone and they are just struggling to get back online and deal with all of this. And he said, when I asked him, why do you think that these attackers targeted your company, your Miami-based company, about 1,500 employees, been around for 20 years. He said, as you heard in the piece, that he thinks that they just figured that all the small businesses that rely on him wouldn't be able to fight back. And it appears that in many cases, he's right. He said that it's not possible to protect against every vulnerability because software is just changing and updating all the time.
Yeah. So we know President Biden said something to the effect that he was going to be delivering a response to Vladimir Putin, which is kind of like a vague answer.
Right.
So aside from the president, beyond the president, how is the White House responding to these latest attacks? We already know that President Biden spoke to Vladimir Putin prior to this event happening about the problem, and Putin's response was like, "Hey, we get attacked too."
Right. I mean, cybersecurity was really a centerpiece of this summit in Geneva that took place just 3 weeks ago. And coming out of the summit, both President Biden and President Putin were vowing to work together. Now, Putin was sort of combative about it. He said, I don't know why everyone thinks that these attacks are originating in Russia. They're actually coming from the United States. So he wasn't taking ownership of the problem. He wasn't acknowledging that there is very good intelligence that indicates that Russian criminals, and in some cases, the Russian intelligence services themselves, are behind these hacks. But he did say that it was important to him and that he wanted to work on it with President Biden. And so obviously, this is a setback, especially when you're talking about the other situation that is still unfolding, we're still learning about, which is this apparent hack of a contractor for the RNC, very similar to what we saw at the DNC. Now, the RNC says that none of its private information was viewed, was stolen, but we're learning that it was most likely a Russian intelligence unit that carried out this attack just last week. And so that's certainly a sign, because we know that this would not happen if it wasn't, at least being given a wink and a nod by President Putin, and in the worst case scenario, being encouraged by President Putin. It's a sign that, as many suspected, he's not necessarily good, that his word is not good on this issue. And so it really raises the stakes for these ongoing meetings that are taking place between top cybersecurity officials in this country and Russian officials.
So when it comes to this latest ransomware attack, it wasn't just companies in the U.S. This was a global attack. How are other countries responding to this?
Right. Well, it's interesting because Kirsten Todd, who is the cybersecurity expert that we interviewed in that piece, she made the case that the only true way to respond to this is for countries to come together and have a unified response, that there isn't necessarily all that much that the U.S. can do on its own. You don't necessarily want to start a cyber war, a tit for tat, but if the U.S. works with other countries that were affected by this hack, even if it is just to come together and say, we are going to prevent ransom being paid to these attackers, or we are going to work harder to crack down or regulate cyber currency, or we are going to work together to pressure Russia to extradite these criminals when they attack companies around the world, that she argued that is really the only thing that is going to move the needle, that it can't just be the U.S. Pressuring Russia to extradite these criminals, but it has to be Sweden, whose grocery chain got shut down, or any of the other countries affected by this. She said you have to look at it the same way that you look at terrorists from other countries. When they commit crimes against the U.S. would then try to have them extradited from their home country. And she said that the same approach needs to be taken here with universal pressure from the global community brought to bear on Russia to crack down on these criminals.
That makes a lot of sense. Nancy, thank you.
You're welcome.